All right, let's dive right in. We're going to tackle this incredible story of leadership, ambition, and, well, faith. We're talking about the turbulent reigns of Israel's very first three kings.
So, this is really the question that sets the whole stage, right? What happens when a whole nation demands a leader that maybe they aren't quite ready for? It's all about power, faith, and that age-old warning, be careful what you wish for.
Okay, so for generations, Israel's system was different. They didn't have a king. Instead, they had these temporary leaders called judges who'd kind of pop up when things got really bad. But, the people started getting restless. They looked over at their neighbors, saw these powerful kings, and thought, hey, we want one of those.
And this is where you see the huge shift.
I mean, they were going from this decentralized, God will provide a leader when we need one system, to a full-blown centralized monarchy. And the prophet Samuel, he tried to warn them. He said, look, this is going to cost you. We're talking taxes, your sons in the army, a ruler with total control. But they didn't care. They were insistent. They wanted a king.
And so, they got their king. Enter Saul. He's Israel's very first king, chosen by God to give the people what they demanded. He was the answer to their prayers, you could say, but he also ended up being a massive cautionary tale.
I mean, on paper, Saul looked like the perfect guy for the job. He's from a small, unimportant tribe, so no one felt threatened. He was physically impressive, literally taller than everybody else. He even seemed humble at first, actually hiding when they tried to announce him as king. And his first big military victory? A huge success. Everything was looking great.
And he wasn't a flash in the pan either. He reigned for 40 years. That's a long time. But even with all that time on the throne, this one fatal flaw, it started to creep in, and it showed up pretty early on.
And here's the absolute crux of it. Saul's biggest problem wasn't military strategy. He was a good fighter. No, his problem was spiritual impatience. He just could not wait for God. When the pressure was on, he'd jump the gun and disobey a direct order, trying to pass it off as strong leadership.
This quote just says it all. The prophet Samuel lays it out for him after Saul gets impatient and performs a sacrifice he had no authority to do. Samuel tells him to obey is better than sacrifice. See, Saul thought he was doing something religious, something that looked good, but what God really wanted was just for him to listen and obey. Simple as that.
And then came the final straw. It was another case of what you might call partial obedience. He was told to completely destroy an enemy, the Amalekites, but he decided to spare their king and keep the best of the livestock. And when Samuel called him out on it, he blamed the soldiers. Then he tried to spin it, saying they were going to sacrifice the animals to God. That was it. That was the moment God rejected him as king.
And from that moment of rejection, it was a tragic downward spiral. You can see it right here. God's spirit leaves him, and he's tormented. He becomes obsessed, just consumed with this paranoid jealousy of the young up-and-comer, David. He gets so desperate, he abandons God's guidance completely and consults a medium, something he himself had outlawed. It all ends in the worst way possible, defeat on the battlefield and taking his own life. A king who had so much promise, and his entire dynasty just ends with him.
So while Saul is falling apart, God has already picked his replacement. And this is where David comes into the picture. He is the complete opposite of Saul in just about every way. He wasn't chosen for his looks or his height. He was chosen for his heart.
And this is probably the most important distinction in the whole story. With Saul, the people got the king they thought they wanted, the tall, handsome warrior who looked the part. But with David, God chose the king they actually needed, a leader whose heart was aimed in the right direction, even if he was flawed.
And get this, he was just a kid, maybe 12, 15 years old, when the prophet Samuel shows up and secretly anoints him king. He was the youngest of 8 brothers, just a shepherd boy. Literally, nobody saw this coming. And what does he do after being told he's the next king? He just goes back to his sheep. Incredible.
Yeah, David's road to the throne was long and full of twists and turns. He goes from being a simple shepherd to a court musician for Saul, then the hero who takes down Goliath. And what's his reward? He becomes a fugitive, hunted by a jealous King Saul for nearly a decade. But here's the amazing part. David had chances to take Saul out and seize the throne, but he refused. He waited for God's timing. He's finally crowned king when he's 30 years old.
Now, during his reign, David gets this absolutely monumental promise from God. It's called the Davidic Covenant. And basically, God guarantees that David's dynasty won't end like Saul's did. It's a promise that his family line will sit on the throne forever. And this promise becomes the central theme that runs through the rest of the entire story. But we have to be really clear about something. David was not a perfect guy, not even close. His reign is stained by an absolutely horrific moral failure, his affair with Bathsheba, and then having her husband, Uriah, killed to cover it up. It was a terrible, terrible sin that brought chaos to his own family for years.
And right here, this is the night and day difference between Saul and David. When Saul got caught, what did he do? He made excuses, he blamed other people. But when David was confronted by the prophet Nathan, he completely fell apart. He owned it. He confessed his sin, he accepted the judgment, and he didn't run from God. That act of genuine repentance is what set him apart. It's the key.
So after David's own 40-year reign, the crown passes to his son Solomon. And Solomon inherits the kingdom at its absolute apex. It's united, it's prosperous, it's powerful. The stage is perfectly set for a true golden age.
And for a while, it really was a golden age. Solomon starts out so well. He humbly asks God for wisdom instead of wealth or power. He's the one who finally builds the magnificent temple in Jerusalem that his father dreamed of. The kingdom enjoys peace and prosperity like it had never seen before. This was the high watermark of the Israelite monarchy.
But here's where it all starts to go wrong. And this number is it's mind-blowing. 1,700 wives and 300 concubines. These were mostly political alliances, marriages to seal treaties with foreign nations. But the cost was huge. Through these foreign wives, Solomon's focus, his devotion to God, just started to crumble. He started building temples for their gods, first to appease them, and then he started participating himself.
So God's judgment comes down, and it's severe. The kingdom is going to be ripped in two after Solomon dies. His son is going to lose almost all of it. But, and you can't miss this part, that promise to David? It still holds. It's not completely broken. The line won't be extinguished. One tribe will remain loyal to David's family, keeping that covenant alive.
Okay, so let's zoom out for a second. We've got 3 kings. Each one reigned for 40 years. 3 very different men, 3 very different stories. But when you put them all together, you start to see this really powerful theme emerge.
It really boils down to this. Saul's story teaches us that authority without obedience, it just falls apart. David's life shows us that even after a massive failure, real repentance keeps the promise going. And Solomon? He's a stark warning that all the wisdom in the world means nothing if you're not faithful. It will just decay.
And that really brings us to the main point of this whole saga. This story of Israel's first 3 kings, it's not really about the search for a perfect human leader, because they all failed. Saul failed, David failed spectacularly, Solomon failed. The real hero of the story, if you will, is the promise that God made. It's a promise that kept moving forward, right through the middle of all this human messiness, carried along not by their perfection, but by God's own unwavering faithfulness.